So let's start with the TJ types. Does that work?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So all the TJ types in the Myers-Briggs system, ENTJs, ESTJs, INTJs, and ISTJs, they are the most influenced by the judging functions of extroverted thinking, or what we call effectiveness, and introverted feeling, or what we call authenticity. And extroverted thinking is basically taking thought and applying it to the outside world. It's usually seen, maybe the easiest way to understand it is resource management, making something happen, setting up progress and projects to continue down a road, and after progress has been made, create a beachhead, right? And then continue to make progress and then create a beachhead. It's forward movement in making things happen. And it has fairly simple criteria to determine whether or not something was good or bad. Did it work or didn't it work?
Yeah. And it's also linear and sequential. In other words, it's not happening random access. Like you said, it's building upon itself. It establishes and then moves forward.
Yeah. And it brings other people in and makes more and more complex things happen. And it's the function that you see the most in things like business and in government and anything that needs a sense of leadership and sort of how do we manage the world, right? How do we make things happen and manage things?
And it's a measurement function. Like it's really focused on measurements and pass-fail criteria. I would argue it's the easiest one that we could talk about measuring things because it's focused on that. So it's probably the most accessible for measurements.
Hence why I started with it, honestly.
Yeah.
It's the major advantages, I would say that the major advantage that TJ types have, and one of the reasons why they come across so confident, is that the judging function, the decision-making function that they're primarily leaning on is the one that's most associated with measurements, metrics, and determining whether or not they passed or failed. Right? Did I get it done? Did I make it happen? Did I succeed? Did I make progress? Yes. Awesome. I did it. Yay. I won. Right? Or I'm doing it right. And so the major advantage that TJ types have, particularly when they're interfacing with the outside world, is that their esteem, their estimation, their surveyor tools are real tools of measurements. Like that's what it is intrinsically. And that's one of the reasons why TJ types have a tendency to lean on their own ability to make things happen and get things done because they've watched themselves do it over and over and over again. So that's a major advantage that TJs have when it comes to self-esteem. On the flip side, the other judging function or decision-making function they're leaning on is the exact opposite. It's introverted feeling or authenticity. And introverted feeling or authenticity does not work based on measurements. It works based on feelings, right? Does this feel right to me? Is this in alignment with who I see myself as, right? Is this a good thing for me to do? When I make these actions or do these things or think these thoughts or have these feelings, is this indicating that I am a good person, that I'm well motivated, that I'm being true and honest with myself? These are far less decisive criteria. These are way more abstract and opaque and kind of, sort of a little all over the place.
They're inner and subjective as well. So they're inside of the person. You can't necessarily display this outside of yourself. And because of that, you're the only one that can determine anything. No one else can really tell you, oh, you're out of alignment with yourself. Like you're the only person that can say that about yourself.
Exactly. And so while TJ types have the advantage of when they enter the outside world of having maybe the most easy to calibrate metrics of measurements of self-esteem, they simultaneously are being influenced by the least of all of those. And the place of certainty is in effectiveness, is in extroverted thinking, and the place of uncertainty is in introverted feeling or authenticity. So the most opaque of all of these also happens to be the place of the most uncertainty. So that advantage of confidence in the outside world is met with the disadvantage of insecurity when it comes to oneself.
I see a lot of TJs struggling right now, though, because our world is more digital, more social, and more emotional than ever. And I see a lot of TJs a little unmoored in what to do about that because they can't put it onto pass-fail criteria. The metrics are a little bit softer edges, not as much definition. And I see a lot of TJs not necessarily knowing how to navigate that space. And so I think that uncertainty, if you're a TJ listening, you're one of those 4 types, I think that you probably are facing some uncertainty in this new world that's emerging. And hang in there. We're going to talk a little about that, but this can be a real challenge for you.
Yeah. Yeah. What once was pretty obvious is now, like, well, I did it. I made it happen. It's like, yes, but did you make it happen the right way?
It's that idea of double bottom lines, right? It's like, It's not just about the numbers. It's also about what good are we doing and how satisfied are people in our organization or in the world. That double bottom line really throws off the TJ because they're not used to that, having a more softer bottom line they've got to account for.
Yeah. Did we all feel heard?
Yeah.
Was everybody respected in all of this? Right. When we made it happen, but what are the implications? And it's not just the result, it's the process as well.
Yeah.
And so there is more uncertainty for this function than ever before. And at the same time, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to, there might be more hesitancy to navigate through the world and how, but as far as their esteem of themselves, did they get it done? Excellent, right? They got it done. And so we are talking about 2 different fronts. We are talking about the feedback we get from the outside world and how that influences us. But we're also talking about the thing that emerges from within, from inside of us. And if for a TJ type, the number one thing they're looking at is pass-fail criteria and making things happen and being effective in the world, then from within, they are probably going to give themselves a pat on the head every time they succeed, every time they get it done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's a major advantage. On the flip side, the other thing that's influencing them is something that is a lot less certain. It has far fewer definitions. And it's more related not to how what happened and whether or not you got something done. It's more related to the quality you are as a human being. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a good or a bad person? What does it mean to have conscience? What does it mean to be in alignment with yourself and be well motivated and have good intentions, or just to understand your intentions at all? So in a place where they're determining their esteem or estimation of themselves based on this criteria, there's going to be a lot of hesitation, and there might be a tendency or a desire to want to oversimplify it. And that becomes the Achilles heel. The Achilles heel is, I'm not going to look at it, or I'm going to be consumed with the question, right? Or I'm going to oversimplify all of it so that when I look at this thing, it's real black and white. Like, am I as unchanging as the tide, right? Am I a person who does not alter who I am at all? That might be what is defined as being a good person, when really it's just being a simple identity in order to not have to manage all the complexity of what it means to be a person with a variety of experiences. And so that estimation of self might end up being oversimplified. And through its oversimplification, that all by itself creates a lack of alignment. Mm-hmm. Because nobody is that simple. Everybody is complex. So when we're talking about be aware of the measurements you're using, be aware of your tools and whether or not they're calibrated. When a TJ type gets undermined by their own concept of identity, when they try to simplify it through things like what's called role-person merger, which is merging who you believe you are with the thing you're doing in the world. Like, I'm a professor is role-person merger, right? Like, I'm defining myself by my professorship, or I'm defining myself by whatever my career position is. When a person does that, there's a bunch of other parts of themselves going, yeah, but we're in here too. And we need some representation. We need you to pay attention to us. We need you to hear all the elements of who you are. And if a TJ type refuses to look at all of that because it's too complex or they're afraid of what they'll see in there, then the thing that is eroding their self-esteem is doing it from the shadows, right? It's just kind of leaching their self-esteem into a place they can't even see where it's going. And so calibration doesn't necessarily mean you have to become obsessed with identity or just do that all the time. But paying attention to that and having an awareness of what is ultimately robbing that sense of self and go, oh, it might be this part of who I am. And it's because I can't get my finger on it. I'm so used to being able to just define this clearly and know what it is based on the result I got. I'm so used to that. How do I even contend with this part of who I am that feels like it's ever changing and doesn't have anything that I can really point to and has no definition or defined end game? Calibrating that part of who, or having calibrated instruments means just being aware of the nature of the instrument at all.
Yeah.
Right. There is nothing definitive here. It's just getting to know yourself. It's being in touch with your emotions. It's being in touch with the things that are truly motivating you and your intentions. It's having a finger on the pulse of all of that and giving it some space to express, not necessarily pinning it down and requiring it to be anything, but to just allow it to be and get in touch with that and know that this is a place that every once in a while you're going to feel uncertain about, right? You're going to go, am I really a good person? Am I doing good things? Am I just kind of being a selfish, like sort of despot that's out for myself? And every once in a while, feeling that way doesn't mean that that's true. It means it's a question, and you might want to listen to it and check in and go, no, I actually think I have other instincts in there too. I have other intentions and motivations. I want to do good things, and I want to make sure that people are happy in my life, and I care about people. And so then being able to have that internal conversation means not having your self-esteem eroded by hearing that question and then just pushing it away and going like, no, I'm not even going to listen to it. And now that question is hanging there, and now it's causing even more doubt. And now you're throwing everything into making things happen in the outside world as this part of you in the background gets more and more uncertain and more insecure. And because it's got to be the 1-2 punch. It's got to be both of it. It's got to be both a sense of self-esteem that comes from your personhood and a sense of esteem that comes from what you are accomplishing in the outside world.